Services Standing Committee of the Town of Collingwood. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we will acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. And we would like to adopt the agenda. And I have moved by Vice Chair Comey and seconded by Mayor Saunderson, the content of the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee agenda for September the 8th be adopted as presented. And I will call the vote on that. Whoops, and I vote on that too. Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on in our business, do we have any business arising from the previous meeting? Seeing none, we'll move on to declarations of pecuniary interest. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest at this time? And I'll remind members of the committee that should that happen, please say so as soon as it comes to you. We now have deputations, and I'm happy to welcome Jeff Young and Carrington Lawson and Shannon McCready, and Jessica Lair, who are with Bee City Canada, or Pollinate Collingwood, and they're hoping that we will become a bee city. And Clerk Almus, do we let them in now? Is that how that works?
Correct. We're just allowing them to join now.
There's Jessica. Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I see Shannon. Hello. Welcome. Jeff. Welcome. And I think we're waiting for one more.
Carrington may not join us.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be just the three of us.
All right. Well, I believe you have 10 minutes. Take it away.
Excellent. Perfect. Excellent. I am Jessica with Pollinate Collingwood, and we're here today to talk to you about Bee City Canada and the town of Collingwood, hopefully attaining that certification. And in fact, we're asking the council to support an application for that. Next slide, please. So here we are Pollinate Collingwood, and we came into existence this past February, and we've had great successes this past year. We've put in 15 community native pollinator gardens under the David Suzuki Foundation Butterfly Ways Community Gardens. And now to be part of that, it has to be volunteer-led, which we all are. In addition to that, we were offered the pilot program for bringing it to schools this fall. So we have 9 committed. And with that, as a pilot program, we get to have the plants donated from the David Suzuki Foundation, which is fantastic in itself. We've had a successful native plant sale this past year in which we sold all the plants that we had. The money is now going to educational projects as well as additional gardens next year. We've created and distributed educational outreach materials, including information sheets, signs, and activities, including through Camp Collingwood. We've linked interested people and parties in town, including residences, businesses, organizations, and the town itself. We have had success with digital media. We have over 150 followers on Facebook, as well as a Twitter account and Instagram account. And we've also been in traditional media with a couple of newspaper articles. Next slide, please. So what is Bee City Canada? Bee City Canada is an organization that connects people, pollinators, and places. It started in the United States in 2011. And Shelley Candle started Bee City Canada in 2016. She was really keen and saw the benefits of the program and brought it forth to us. There are now over 100 other bee cities in Canada, including Aurelia, Barrie, and the township of Georgian Bay, which is by Honey Harbor, as well as campuses and schools. In 2018, the United States program merged and became an official program under Xerces Society, which is a big deal because this connects international groups and is not for profit, and wonderfully, it is science-based, which is very important. Now we're going to switch to Shannon, and she's going to tell us a little bit about some of our native species.
Hi, thank you. Across Ontario, many local communities are part of Bee City Canada.
Next slide.
Next slide. These communities help to support many native insects, including 12 pollinators on Ontario's species at risk list. Canadian pollinators include bees, wasps, flies, beetles, butterflies, moths, and birds. There are 855 species of native bees in Canada, in addition to the domesticated honeybee, which are not native. When we take a look at the species at risk list for native plants, next slide, please. The number greatly increases. Pollinators and native plants have an inherent relationship that is mutually beneficial. Caterpillars rely on specific native host plants and can only survive if they can feed on them. 3 species of butterflies have been lost in Ontario due to the unavailability of wild lupin. We now face the same challenge of providing enough milkweed that monarch butterflies don't meet the same fate. All native flowers, species at risk or not, provide the best and most accessible food for pollinators, and pollinators aid the reproduction of many native flowers. These plants, in turn, create food and shelter for birds and other animals up the food chain. Next slide. Beyond the species that we have just touched upon, there is a loss of biodiversity around the world. Every year, we see a growing number of articles warning us that pollinators need our help and we need theirs as well. Here are headlines of a few articles from the past 2 years that address the importance of native pollinators. We can support pollinators by recovering habitat, increasing the use of native plants, reducing or eliminating pesticide use, leaving leaf litter through the winter, and leaving early spring dandelions. Next slide, please. On October 16, 2019, the Collingwood Council officially declared the climate crisis. The planting of native pollinator species and education around them directly correlates to supporting efforts to mitigate climate change. Their presence in town supports the natural heritage systems, supports urban wildlife, helps to create wildlife corridors, and assists with sustainable development measures. Budget reports, the official plan discussion papers, town surveys, and the town's urban forest master plan all include reference to biodiversity supported by native pollinators. As an aside, 94% of survey respondents gave 4 or 5 stars to restoration and the protection of natural habitats. And next slide, please. And I'm going to hand it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Shannon. Good afternoon, everyone. You may ask, how does planting native pollinator plants directly link to the town of Collingwood? Native plants are considered to be cost-effective beautification while supporting biodiversity, so it's a win-win. The plants, while being cost-effective, also provide educational value and are an important source of food and shelter for our pollinators. These plants require little watering, they are naturally resistant to pests and disease, and are perfectly adapted to our local soil and climate. Native pollinator plants also create low-impact development for environmental management. Adding native plants enhances environmental sustainability and are easy to create and maintain within the town. Bioswales, rain gardens, and the use of natural areas beside pavement are some great examples. Pollinators also support healthy ecosystems that clean the air, increase carbon sequestration, stabilize soils, and help from the severe weather. Additional benefit is that these green spaces help to lower the urban heat island effect, as stated as a goal in the official plan discussion papers. Next slide, please. Native pollinator gardens also support ecotourism and mental health. They create an eco-friendly brand image for the town, which the town already has, so continue there. And there are also great events across the country that involve identifying, recording, reporting, and even tagging butterflies. In 2011, the City of Toronto released a document named Butterflies of Toronto and encouraged people to participate in the joy of butterfly watching by hunting for host plants and visiting their top 10 exceptional butterfly viewing locations. There's also an app called iNaturalist where you can take pictures on your cell phone, and any insect or bug you see or plant, it will give you an ID. So it's a very good learning tool. Green prescriptions or ecotherapy are also prescribed for general well-being and mental health and have become more popular than the last few years. Benefits of being active in nature include reducing stress, anxiety, and depression. In Collingwood, there are already several groups that provide opportunities to get active in nature, It can be on a trail, in a forest, or even just in your garden, watching the birds. Next slide, please. Well, looking beyond the town boundaries, pollinators also support the agricultural industry. Native bees are the major pollinators in North America and around the world. Pollinator partnership states between 75 to 95 of all flowering plants on Earth need help with pollination, and 1 out of every 3 bites of your food is there because of pollination. Together, the plants and their pollinators are indispensable natural resource, and last year, all pollinators added $217 billion to the global economy. So what Bee City Canada will do for Collingwood, it will publicize the town's designation through their national website, social media, and other media channels. We'll also be able to use their logo for promotional material and signage. They'll have educational webinars for anyone who's interested, who wants to learn more about it. There'll also be a welcome package with an official declaration recognizing our town as a bee city. You can also reach out to other bee cities across Ontario and collaborate with them, while also creating wildlife corridors to help encourage native pollinator insects around the country. Next slide, and I'll give it back to Jess to wrap things up.
We're going to need you to unmute, Jessica.
Thank
And
you.
just for that, I'm going to give you an extra 10 seconds.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Okay, and we're actually past this slide. There we go. Excellent. Thank you so much. So let's look at the requirements for becoming a Bee City Canada member. There is an annual application. In that application, you identify any current initiatives taking place in your community. These commitments and actions would address creating biodiversity in pollinator habitats, educating the public about the importance of pollinators, a yearly commitment to celebrate National Pollinator Week, which is the 3rd week of June, a discussion of the city's long-term pollinator strategy, and a brief explanation of what it means to our town to become a bee city. As said, there is an annual fee. It's of $200. It's waived the first year, and that goes to educational materials as well as communities that may not have the funds to put in place a pollinator strategy or gardens. So it actually goes forward to something. And finally, a resolution from the town to accept the designation. Next slide, please. So next steps. We are asking for council to support the creation of a working committee or group with the goal to submit an application for 2021. Things to consider: the annual application of $200 after the first year, commitment from the council and town to complete an application for becoming a Bee City Canada community. With that, it would require the establishment of a working group. And that is basically because, again, it's through the town. We actually have to have that sign off along the way. But it would also include the involvement, for example, of somebody from that Parks and Rec program, as well as non-governmental organizations, for example, Blue Mountain Watershed Trust, as well as interest groups, for example, the Nature League. And this is just to help form the direction of the program. For 2021, it could mean a possibility of 3 meetings: one to prepare the application, which is something that we would do, but also involve other members; the preparation of a National Pollinator Week event, for example, an education evening with public seminars; and then finally, a meeting that would involve a follow-up or any other requirements for the year. So we'd be happy to take any questions that you have at this point.
Thank you so much. And your timing was almost perfect. Well done. So at this point, we turn, I believe, and Clerk Elmas can correct me if I'm incorrect, but we turn to members of the public who may be joining us in our webinar format if they have any questions for you folks before I bring it to the committee. So Clerk Elmas, has anyone who's watching had indicated that they were interested in asking any questions on this issue?
No, it does not appear that there is interest at this point, Chair McLeod.
And so I turn it over to the committee. Do we have any, Councillor Berman.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just great presentation, and if it's appropriate now, I'll move that the request be referred to staff.
And I think that is exactly what we will have to do because there's a financial component to it. And Clerk Almas, you can correct me again if I'm wrong, but I believe that we would have to ask for staff recommendation regarding this because of the financial component. And okay, great. I see you're nodding. And I imagine that Clerk Almas, you can massage the wording or whatever needs to happen. And so Councillor Berman, do you have a seconder for your motion, do you think?
I do now.
You do have a seconder for your motion. And so the motion is to ask for a staff report to come back. I'm going to assume we can do this before the next meeting. Clerk Almas?
Sorry, through yourself as the chair to the committee. I think that it would probably be doable by the next standing committee meeting. We'll just have to check with PRC staff and look at their capacity at this point, but that would be the anticipation.
Correct. So we have the motion on the floor and we have a seconder. Do we have anyone else who wants to speak either to the motion or to the group? Vice Chair Comey.
Thank you so much, Chair. Through you to the committee, I just want to say I thought that was a really great presentation. Like, I made a bunch of notes, I learned a lot, but something really piqued my interest, and I just, for my own curiosity. And through you, Chair, I think, Jessica, you mentioned it. There's a component where you're working with our local schools, and I wasn't sure, is that through both Pollinate Collingwood and potentially the Bee City, or maybe if you wouldn't mind just enlightening us a little more on that.
Jessica?
Certainly, happy to. So yes, the school project was offered as a project through David Suzuki Foundation, through Pollinate Collingwood, and that goes into the schools. Bee City, any educational material could also head that way. In terms of the sale that we did, we have committed $110 is for a group of us for a pollinator partnership education kit, which would also be accessible to the schools. So right now, 9 schools, we have a possibility of up to 12 for this planting this fall. The plants would arrive this upcoming week, and there's a window of about 2 weeks. And so far the feedback's been great from local schools. The kids are excited to get out and have this education opportunity. The nice thing about all of these plants is they're divisible for the most part over the next couple of years. And so the gardens will expand, whether they choose to go across the schoolyard further, and the 15 gardens that we planted, they can disperse around the businesses and the community as well. So the whole idea is just to keep it going.
Vice Chair Comey?
That's awesome. Thanks. I think that's absolutely a wonderful way to integrate a program, throughout the community. So thank you and your organization again. That was a really great presentation.
Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I know there's 3 of you here today. I'm wondering how many in your group and when you established yourselves?
There are 4 of us. Great question. I started discussions way back with the head of Parks, Recreation, Culture back in November. Just trying to see what the feel was, support within the community as well, talking to our local organizations, Nature League, Horticultural Society, Environment Network, and so on and so forth. People seem very keen and came across the David Suzuki Foundation. Their big goal is 12 measurable gardens, which was a great place that I thought to start. People are familiar with David Suzuki Foundation, its name. Again, these 12 gardens, if you explore around the community, you'll find that there's everything from little 2-foot by 2-foot gardens to 3-foot by 8 gardens. And it's a way to show people that they can just do this in their backyard. It's about adding native plants where you can, not taking apart gardens per se, because even non-natives do provide pollination services. But as Shannon touched upon, it's the ability for hosting the larvae, the caterpillars, for our local ecosystems, which is really important. Jeff connected through the trail working group, and then Shannon connected through the library. The library was fantastic and did a post about Pollinate Collingwood on their social media page, and she connected with us. And we were able to get one community community meeting together right before COVID was called. That was that Wednesday night. We had about 17 or 18 people there, and Carrington was there, and she was somebody else who had been suggested to contact with. So ourselves, there's 4 of us is sort of the leads, and in town there's about 10 businesses that we have had great contact with. In fact, some of them have created their own working groups, Red Scarf Equestrian and the Wild Stand. They've sort of evolved and done some other things, but it sort of exploded from there. It's gone even beyond, I think, all of our expectations. And to have this honor to take it into the schools, which will then help to bring it to residents, I mean, it's, as I said, exceeded all of our expectations. The nice thing about Jeff, Shannon, Carrington, and I is we each have different strengths that we bring to the table too. So it's been a joy to work with everybody.
Well, congratulations to all of you. Thank you for your initiative, and you're going to create quite a buzz around town, it would seem. So thank you.
Just couldn't help himself there.
Couldn't help myself.
With the dad jokes. And I believe that's all the questions from the committee. Is it? Is that all of you? I have one. Is it you folks that's put up the little garden right near Pretty River on the train trail? Is that you?
Correct. That's one that Jeff put in through the Trails Committee, also clearing. That was something sort of his initiative along that way. There's also one over by the Hamilton drain, just past the crossing on here, Ontario. You can find them at Ignora. There's 2 there, Collingwood Brewery, the Learning Garden, the Community Garden at Heritage Park, which is an amazing one because it just, that garden is incredible with all the community partnerships involved in all of it. Where else do we have? Red Scarf Equestrian, the Wild Stand, Jeff and Shannon. Am I missing anyone? I don't know. We're about 15. The one down by Watts Boathouse, which is lovely and is cared for by the paddle club. So yeah, it just, again, exceeded in a community all expectations.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much for answering our questions and for your presentation tonight. And I'll call the question of the committee on the motion that is before us. Great, that passes unanimously, and we'll receive a staff report at our next committee meeting. Thank you so much for being with us, Jessica, Shannon, and Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up on our agenda is, let me just reopen my screen. I love it when they go to sleep when you're busy. Here we are, Collingwood Harbour Charter Air Service, and we are expecting a presentation at this time from Dustin Foreman. And I think the clerk or clerk services will be letting Dustin into the meeting now, and we will welcome him. And I believe he has a PowerPoint presentation for us that has been forwarded to us in advance, but we're going to see that as well. Let's just wait for him.
Yeah, I am here.
Hi.
I am here. I was watching the whole thing. I'm here.
Great. Take it away. You have 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, first time Zoom call here, so don't expect any miracles. That was a great presentation. But yeah, I submitted to you guys a form of the business plan. There's probably quite a bit of information there. There's a lot of details. Those are all taken care of. I just wanted you guys to see them in case you needed to be reassured of those. I just want to focus on maybe just the big picture and just kind of fill you guys in on what I had in mind, the vision, and there's just 2 specific things that I'd be asking, and I hope to, more than anything else, just to get you guys to share the vision and get you on board. So yeah, I can just kind of dive right into it here, and then you answer any questions you guys have. So yeah, specifically. Well, the name is Slate Blue Airways, and that's to kind of capture the many different shades of blue that are on the bay. Yeah, what we're asking for is the permission to operate out of the harbor. So it's going to be like a float plane charter service, and this is something that I've got a lot of experience doing all over the world. This is the area that I'm from. I grew up a professional skier, and Collingwood is not quite home, but pretty close to home. The other pilot that's on board is currently over in Dubai, and he's someone that I've actually shared the similar career path up north in Northern Ontario and British Columbia. He was in Australia. I was over in Vietnam. So he's actually from Elora, so he's interested in coming home too. So we're both pretty invested in the area, and we want to kind of showcase what Collingwood has. And particularly what Georgian Bay has. And so we're kind of asking for a dock space to do passenger transfers. Now, the aircraft probably wouldn't be kept there overnight or anything permanent. It would just be probably 3 to 4 days a week to come and go. So I've been down and checking out the area and determining its like suitability and everything else. And there's actually 3 to 4 areas that could work. So I can get into those when I discuss the base. But yeah, so the vision is to bring the boots on the ground float plane charter service to the Collingwood waterfront, adding value and aviation culture to the area while making it a part of Collingwood's future development going forward. And the service will be designed to honor the unique Collingwood and Georgian Bay area and Canadian bush flying culture as a whole, some of its nostalgia, and some of the aviators that I've met that helped to shape the industry. So the market is kind of threefold. So local tourism, as everybody knows, there's quite a bit of weekend traffic in Collingwood these days, city traffic, people coming up here for the weekend or the day and looking for things to do. Of course, in the winter, there's the mountains and the ski hill, which grabs pretty much everybody. But in the summer, I think that, some more variety and offering some scenic tours, 2 to 3 days a week, again, out of the harbor, showcasing the area and some of the closer islands and the escarpment. So for those tourists, that would be one area of the market. I've talked to a lot of people that have second homes and properties, maybe up in Point of Barrel and Sans Souci, Parry Sound, Georgian Bay, Muskokas. And so for some of them that need to get in and out quickly or more efficiently, it would be to service them.
Dustin, I don't want to interrupt you. I apologize.
Yeah.
Do you want us to be forwarding your presentation? We're on the first page here, and I'm wondering whether we ought to be moving through it for you.
Yeah. No, I'm still kind of just talking about the market.
Okay, sorry. Just wanted to be sure.
Yeah. That's okay. Sorry. So yeah, most of everything is pretty well there for you to see. But basically just service, kind of the first time visitors to Collingwood, as well as people that live here, and businesses, realtors that may want to show some of the islands, and then charter service to private destinations and some of the Muskokas. And in the long term, I've been up to Tobermory to check that area out and spoke to some business owners up there. And in the long term, I'd actually like to get maybe like a daily trip out of Collingwood up to Tobermory, and then have a second airplane based up there to do some tours in Tobermory, because that area, I'm not sure if any of you have been, but it's bustling. And the drive from Collingwood to Tobermory is, it's kind of lengthy. In a flight, you could be there in about 25 minutes, and it's beautiful up that coastline. So, there's, that's something that's on the radar in the long term as well. But for now, the focus is just to kind of be able to come and go from Collingwood Harbor and have a place to transfer passengers from and build from that. So you can go to the next slide. So the base, there's 4 areas that I had in mind, and I would take your guys' direction on what would be best for the town and the other businesses and public that's operating there. The one was that new Birch Street dock that got put in. It's actually a kayak launch, and there's a boat launch there too, but it's a soft rubber floating dock, perfect for a seaplane. Again, there's good tie downs, and it's not a place that the seaplane would be hanging out all day. This is a small airplane. We're talking about like a 6-seat Cessna 185, so very, very quiet, not very intrusive, and so that dock would work really well. The other one that would work is the government dock. So there's a space in front of the Huronic. If there was just a 30-40 foot section that was maybe painted red along the rail, just to indicate that that's a seaplane dock. That's something that happens out west, where it's the part of the culture, seaplane spots on government docks is pretty common, and they just generally mark it off with some bumpers and a red painting on the rail, which indicates that it's for seaplanes only. So that was the other one. The other one is the over by the Collingwood Marina at the end of one of those fingers would be just fine. And then the fourth option, I've got a couple phone calls into like the Cranberry Yacht Club to see if there's space over there. So that would be kind of going more the private route. And that's something they're really, really busy as well. So space is a premium, and I'm waiting for a call back from the actual, I guess it would be the marina owner or manager. So that's the other option. And the pilots, there's myself, as I mentioned, and then the other pilot is Tim Ketcher. So both very high time experienced pilots that have operated, seaplanes safely. 0 incidents all around the country and the world. And we've got resumes to show and references and anything like that, if that was of interest. Insurance, these are other boxes that will be kind of internal stuff. I just wanted you guys to be aware that it's all being thought about. The customers I talked a little bit about. So the general public, and people with vacation properties, and then business owners like realtors and people that need to get to Toronto, property owners, people with cottages, maybe in places that are a little bit far off and difficult to drive to. Those are the customers. Competition, that's the beauty of it. This is the first thing in it of its kind for Collingwood. The area really, really lends itself to it. It's kind of funny. The pandemic brought me home and kind of put the whole industry on ice, and so it sort of created this opportunity in some ways, because I was down there looking at it all, and I had always thought Collingwood was a big, rough lee shore that gets heavy swell and there's no place for a seaplane. But when I saw the harbor and some of the protection it has and the grain elevators out there, I just instantly thought that for the image of Collingwood and having the backdrop of the escarpment there with the ski hills in the backdrop, and being able to get to some of the islands, which I know how beautiful those are in the area. I just thought it would be something that's really, really good. And so there is no competition locally. I think there is a helicopter maybe out of the airport that does tours, but I've seen them just a few times in the summer, but it's not the same as being able to climb onto a seaplane on the water. It's a part of Canadian culture, like a very big part of Canadian culture, and I just think it's very Canadian and a very different experience. And I've got some photos which hopefully will capture that, what I'm talking about for you guys. Pricing has been discussed, and about the competition, there is comparable things in Parry Sound, which is obviously doesn't have the what Collingwood has going on, with just the amount of development and money that's coming into the town and tourism, and it works in Parry Sound. So I thought that that's a pretty good indicator that it would probably work even better here. I flew for one summer when several years ago. I came home and flew out of Toronto Island for a company that runs charters into Muskokas. So but that's a separate thing. So those are the two competitors in the area. But again, there's nothing in Collingwood, so it's very much.
Dustin, I'm going to hold you there because your 10 minutes has expired.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you have a couple of last thoughts you wanted to give us quickly?
Yeah, I should have had a timer going. I'm sorry. Really, if I could just skim through the photos quickly, that's it. So there's the harbor, safe areas for takeoff and landing. And there's one of the seaplane docks I was canvassing for. And there's an aerial shot of the harbor, some of the escarpment.
Yeah.
Of course, these are just local attractions. That's Henry's fish restaurant and some places up on Georgian Bay. these are places I've flown into, Georgian Bay. I think Lake Bay is the other one, Go Home Bay up in Sans Souci, all places that I've seen from above. Now, this is a similar service in Tofino where I flew, and Tim actually flew there as well after me. So that's the same airplane that I'm speaking of, a Cessna 180 float plane. And you can see like the visuals from above are incredible. You can just go ahead. There's only 2 more slides. Northern Ontario. That's where I started my career on a, again, similar type of airplane. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, guys, that was my first presentation, but I'm sure you'll have questions, and go ahead.
Thank you very much for that. And so as we do in a committee with deputations, I'll ask if there's any of our members of the public who've joined us in the webinar forum, if there are any questions from them, and I'll look to the clerk to advise me on that.
Certainly, we do have a few attendees, Chair McLeod. If anybody's interested in speaking to the matter, they can either raise their hand or enter in the chat feature that you would wish to speak. And no one is interested at this point.
Then I will move to our members of the committee if they have any questions that they would like to ask Mr. Foreman about his proposal. Members of the committee? All right, then I have a couple of questions. I know that's a surprise. Can we ask just a couple of things I wanted to ask about your plane in particular? And I'm thinking at this point that what we're looking at is maybe something similar to what you're asking for, I suppose, is something similar to what the Huronic does at our harbor, which is that there's a spot, we have a contract with that operator, and there's an exchange and there's a percentage and so on and so forth. Is that what you're thinking of, Mr. Foreman, with regard to this presentation?
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of the like a similar model that they have with the kiosk even down there for greeting people, customers and passengers, and then yeah, whatever kind of arrangement they have, we would kind of maybe ask for something similar in terms of a percentage of either a takeoff and landing fee or a percentage of usage or revenue to use that space.
Wonderful. Yeah. And just from a ballpark point of view, I have some friends who live down near Porter. And if you were to bring them from Porter to Collingwood, rather than them having to take the 400, what would that cost them, do you suppose, under this model proposing?
Porter as in like, did you say Porter?
Yeah, the island airport in Toronto.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Sorry, where Porter flies out of, sorry.
Porter flies out of, yeah. Exactly. Well, that's a great destination. The big thing is it allows people to extend their weekend by a couple days too, because of the time saving and the traffic saving, right? I'd have to get back to you on the mileage. Do you know what the mileage is? It's, again, I think the numbers are there. Generally, industry rate is about $8 to $9 a mile for the Cessna. So you could really work it out just based on kind of a straight shot as the crow flies. You could calculate the cost for there. It gets expensive. It's a single person, but if you're talking 3 to 4 people that are all involved, it's actually probably pretty affordable.
Wonderful. All right, thank you very much. And if there are no other questions from the committee, we will thank you for your time and for your energy.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for hearing. And again, this is just kind of the introduction in phase 1, and I look forward to speaking with you guys hopefully further and addressing any concerns that you have, or anything like that.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
That brings us to staff reports. And Clerk Almus, I can see you have something to say.
I didn't know if you would like to address this matter now, if there's any, if the committee is interested in referring this to staff for a report.
Is there any interest in that from this committee? Vice Chair Comey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's reasonable for staff to have a look at. Speaking for myself, I mean, all I can think of is we have a multitude of users down at the harbor, obviously paddlers and swimmers and recreational boaters. So I wouldn't have the expertise to know, a good harbor management plan, but I'm not opposed to the idea of staff having a further look into this. It might spark some interest in tourism, as we've been talking about, and drawing more people down to our waterways. So I'm not opposed to putting the motion for that. We let staff have a discussion and a look into this further to see if it's feasible.
Do we have a seconder for that motion to request a staff report on this issue? It appears we do not.
Okay.
Then we will move on to item 6 in our agenda, which is the public notice policy. And I will ask Clerk Almas to present on that.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair McLeod. So we have just a very brief presentation that I'll take you through. As soon as we get it queued up here. All right. So this is a refresh to our notice bylaw that we previously had in place. So if we go to the first slide. So what is public notice? So formal notice to the public of matters of municipal interest, often required by statute as opposed to more informal information that's shared by the town. It is a requirement to have a notice policy in accordance with Section 270 of the Municipal Act, and it is part of the town's overall commitment to accountability and transparency. Next slide. Why is an update needed? So our current notice bylaw was enacted by Council in 2003, and it makes reference to many aspects of the acts that are no longer in force or have been amended. As long as this bylaw remains in effect, we must adhere to the provisions within the bylaw. And in many instances, there is unnecessary repetition of the notice requirements from other pieces of legislation. And some examples of those are the Municipal Act, Heritage Act, and Planning Act. So again, one of the items that we wanted to make sure that was removed, and again, the notice policy was actually vetted by our municipal solicitor as well, is any areas where there is duplication or they are prescriptive in the statute regarding timeframes. We remove those from the policy because it's already superseded by those pieces of legislation. So a lot of times we ended up being hamstrung by additional notice requirements that were much longer than was necessary. Even though we do strive to provide as much as possible, there has been some instances where we could have ensured a more efficient and expedited process for areas of municipal interest. So our next slide. So what has been changed? The notice provisions provided in the policy do not include anything that is prescribed, as just noted, in specific acts or legislation, statute, or bylaws. It's designed to remain up to date as an overarching. Statutes continue to be regularly amended. So we want to ensure that this stays quite up to date and accurate for as long as possible before we need to review it again. 2003, it's been a long time, so it was definitely needed by 2020. And it's modernized to reflect how citizens of Collingwood receive information. There's now greater emphasis on our website, email, and social media channels. Next slide. So the policy recommendations include a number of notice provisions for the following items. So that includes highways, changes to municipality, changes to council, changes to local boards and the BAA in particular, budget and finance, licensing, and procedures. So again, with respect to procedures, we do have a number of bylaws that are in place that do provide for timeframes. For example, our procedural bylaw is very prescriptive in the notice requirements for our various processes for public participation. when notice has to be provided for our agendas. So if we're doing a significant change to the procedural bylaw, it requires public notice, but we do have additional notice features that are embedded within our various bylaws and policies already. Next slide. So these are examples of what the public notices look like. So the channels that we have, the town website. So there is actually on the main page of our website, on the left-hand column, there's a specific tab that says notices and news. We have our e-newsletter, we have our social media accounts, and we have the newspaper with our town page. So that is, we just wanted to provide a brief overview of the areas, but if there's any questions with regards to the manner of notice or the timeframes that we proposed, we would be happy to address those.
Thank you, Clerk Almas. And I believe we have to ask again for whether there's public comment on this. And any of the attendees who are here would like to ask a question or make a comment regarding what Clerk Almas has presented just now.
Certainly. So we have a number of attendees. And again, if you're interested in speaking to the notice policy, please either use the raise your hand feature or enter your question in the chat and we will unmute you. And there's no interest to comment on this staff report at this time.
And so I'll turn it to our council or to our committee members. Does anybody wish to speak to this or have any questions for Clerk Almas on the changes that are before us? Vice Chair Comey.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. Through you to Clerk Almas, just a question, please. So you touched on the role of the newspaper, and in the staff report, I know like locally we have a printed paper and we have an online paper, but we just put our notices in the printed paper. Is that correct? Do we use the online newspapers at all?
Through Chair McLeod to Councillor Comey. What our process is for the town page, because it is retained through an RFP process, we require that it has to be a published paper and have an online presence as well. So our information is contained in their online versions as well.
Okay, so through you, Madam Chair. Okay, so it has to be both then, not just exclusively online. And that was something I didn't know that's through a RFP process, like a competitive sort of situation. Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's my question.
Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Sarah. Sarah, thank you for the report. As I understand it, we were mandated previously under the Municipal Act to have an actual bylaw, and that's been amended so that now we just are required to have a policy. And so what we're doing is really streamlining to remove our bylaw, and that the policy is setting out how and when we would do our notice provisions. But there are still specific pieces of legislation that do require. And so the policy is basically deferring to those so that we are no longer in conflict as we might have been with our bylaw. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was a great report.
Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the clerk. Sort of following up on what Councillor Comey's question was, in the staff report under definitions 1.6, it says newspaper means a local printed or online publication. So I assume that's where she was going. When does the RFP process take place?
Certainly, through Chair McLeod to Councillor Berman. So we put that additional requirement in our RFP, but in an event where there might not be an option for both, we can foresee in the future. That's why we included in the definition an online or a paper and didn't say and, because eventually there may not be a published hard copy of the newspaper, and we want to make sure that we're covered on both aspects.
Okay, thanks. Great report, and you had me already vetted by the town solicitor.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Any other questions from the committee? And so we'll call the question. We have moved by Mayor Saunderson and seconded by Councillor Madigan that staff report C2020-08 be received, and that council herein repeal public notice bylaw 03-12, and further that council herein approve the public notice policy as attached here too as Appendix A. And we'll call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We move on now to item 7, which is reports and minutes of other committees and boards. And
Chair McLeod.
yes, oh yes. CAO Skinner.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to say that the clerk has been doing a great job in just systematically moving through a good number of bylaws and policies that haven't been updated for 20 or so years. So I think you'll see, leading up to this and coming forward, a few things like this that will be renewed during this term of council that I think will be setting us all on good stead. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Chair and Clerk.
Thank you. And I'm sure everyone on this committee agrees with those sentiments. We move on to number 7, which is reports and minutes of other committees and boards. And do we go through these? We go through these, or do we just read the whole motion and vote on them as a whole?
Certainly through.
I've forgotten how this works in 6 weeks.
Yes, not a problem, Chair McLeod. We have them actually listed all together. So if you put the motion on the floor, and if anybody has any specific questions, they can ask them before you call the vote. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And so we have moved by Councillor Madigan and seconded by Councillor Berman that the minutes of the various committees and boards provided below be received and recommendations contained therein approved, which are the Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes from July the 16th of 2020, the Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management minutes from July the 9th of 2020, the special meeting of the Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management minutes from July the 20th of 2020, the Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management minutes from August the 13th of 2020, Museum and Advisory Committee minutes from July the 30th of 2020 and August 20th of 2020, and the Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee minutes of July 9th, 2020 and August 13th, 2020. And so before I call the vote, I'll ask if there are any comments on any of those reports or minutes that are before us and the recommendations contained therein. Vice Chair Comey.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It's with respect to the latest set of minutes from the museum of August 20th, and it's item 8.2. And I thought it was of interest here that Supervisor Shaw advised that she's going to apply for some COVID-19 emergency support funding through the federal government. And through you, Madam Chair, perhaps Director Milanovic, if I could kindly ask if he could keep us apprised of that as that application is submitted or moves along, because I think it would be something interesting to the committee and the community.
Director Milanovic.
Through you, Chair, to Vice Chair Comey, Council. I will keep you guys abreast of the situation as we move forward.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from members of the committee regarding any of these reports or minutes? I have one that I would like to ask the clerk about regarding the BIA minutes from, I believe from the 20th of July and the 13th of August. And there's a change in the chairship between those two minutes. And there's also, I believe we're going to be dealing with this in the coming days. There appears to have been a resignation, and neither of those are addressed in the minutes. Either resignations accepted or the change of chairship acknowledged. Ought that to be contained within those minutes, or has that not actually happened yet?
Thank you, Chair McLeod. And I appreciate you bringing this to my attention prior to the meeting. And just for confirmation, it was not part of the meeting, so it didn't make the meeting minutes, but it will be included on the next BIA board to accept those resignations.
Okay, Thank you very much. And so I'll call the previous question then, which is the motion that is before us. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And that brings us to item 7.5, which is the strategic multi-year accessibility plan. And we have a final plan, our final review of the final plan after the 30-day public consultation. And I believe we're welcoming Margaret Adolph into the meeting to make a presentation on this topic. I'm hoping that we see her soon. There she is. Now, Margaret, you're going to have to unmute yourself, or someone can perhaps do it for you on this end.
Okay. I've done it.
Wonderful.
It's 2 marks for that, I hope.
Extra points every time.
Anyway, good afternoon, Madam Chair McLeod, Mayor Saunderson, CAOs, the councillors, I should say, and then CAO Skinner and Clerk Sarah Almus, and anybody that's a guest here today. I'm here today to update you on the multi-year accessibility plan. Go back one plan. Just a minute, sorry. I'm here today to update you on the multi-year accessible plan for 2020-2025 after public feedback. I also want to thank Sarah Almus and staff of the clerk's office for their help with the plan. Next slide, please. Why do we need a plan? Under the Ontario Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act, all public sector organizations, as well as private and not-for-profit organizations with 50 or more employees must develop statements of commitment to accessibility and make them publicly available, and create statements of commitment to accessibility and develop a multi-year accessible plan and update them at least once every 5 years. Next slide, please. Well, here's the background. The draft plan was presented by the Accessibility Advisory Committee in July. You probably remember. Sorry about that. It's accounting season. Standing committee recommend we proceed with the public consultation for 30 days period. A communication strategy was developed that included engage Collingwood, including background information, draft plan, survey, and a story feature. Notice in the town page for 3 weeks, numerous social media posts for 4 weeks, direct communication to 18 agencies and organizations with direct interest in accessibility initiatives. Next, please. Next slide, please. So, public engagement. Would you believe we had 180 visitors to our Engage page? 52 people viewed the draft plan. 7 stories received. The stories featured allow individuals to share challenges or successes with accessibility in the community to help guide further changes to our plan. Somebody wants to get hold of me. Sorry about that. 4 responses said the plan was great and they could not recommend any further changes. 4 responses included great ideas to enhance the plan that we will review. I'm going to let you, one of the questions, do you think the draft identifies appropriate goals, commitments, and action items for the next 5 years? We had 4 people say, yes, it's great. Another question was asked, do you have any recommendations or improvements that should be considered to ensure an accessible Collingwood? And the message we got back, nope, Collingwood's facilities, services, and programs are great. So we're getting good feedback. Next slide, please. changes to the final draft. We've made some changes to the final draft because we got some feedback. Somebody has said they'd want to offer more inclusive programs, support for caregivers, environmental for programs in smaller settings, low noise, low lighting, etc. This was for the commitment, accessibility, accessible customer service. So what we've changed here, we've added the following proposed action. Work with various departments that provide programs to explore and identify more inclusive and diversified programming opportunities. One of the things that we're doing right now is at our next meeting, Accessible Advisory Committee meeting, we have on the agenda to address accessible barriers effective to individuals with cognitive disabilities. This has been brought up to us that sometimes we need to address people that have some cognitive disabilities. Next slide, please. The changes to the final draft, again, the feedback to commitment 2, we had accessible website features, large print for signage. The CNIB approved. Communications are in clear, easy to understand language. So what we've done is we revised the wording for the proposed action. And you'll see it on the slide here, continue to monitor. And we've added and train staff on accessible communication, content, and design. And I believe this change makes the commitment more clear. Okay, next slide. There was no changes to commitment 3, accessible employment in workplaces. So we're going to go on to commitment 4. And the feedback we got is better accessibility on trails and sidewalks, more curb cuts, better snow removal on sidewalks and parking spaces. And, you know, in the last few years, we've done amazing jobs of doing curb cuts. I mean, we don't have to go back many years and we saw people struggling with wheelchairs and the curbs. But so we made some changes. So we changed the commitment 4 to read accessible transportation services and systems. And the transportation standard under the integrated accessibility standard regulation sets out the requirements to prevent and remove barriers to public transportation, sidewalks and trails. We've added that, sidewalks and trails, so that everyone can easily travel in Collingwood. And we've added a new action item here, work with the Public Works and Engineering Department to understand opportunities and challenges with respect to winter and regular maintenance to determine how best to create a safe and accessible environment for all individuals, including those with mobility challenges. So as we talk about, we see more scooters, more wheelchairs, and this is to help these people. Next slide, please. So we got commitment 5. Several comments about ensuring parks and playgrounds are accessible, have safety features, and have universal design access. We got a number of people talking about children and playgrounds, children with disabilities. We don't think of that often, but that does happen. So when commitment 5, enhancing accessibility of public spaces, we've made some changes, and when constructing or renovating municipal facilities, and we've now added including parks and playgrounds. Ensure features such as elevators, doors, washrooms, parking, furnishings, and equipment. That's interesting. We never think of equipment for people. Will be fully accessible or appropriate accommodations available that preserves individuals' dignity and independence. You want everybody to feel that they're welcome and they can use everything. Next slide, please. There was no changes to commitment 6, accessible procurement. We're trying to ensure that the products or services are more accessible and meet the needs required. And I think the town of Collingwood does an excellent job with that. There was some concern about accessible residential housing options, including design and affordability. So we've made a change to commitment 7. Determine the best solution regarding accessibility advice and guidance in the site development process, including opportunities to encourage accessible, affordable residential design. Okay, that's a big one. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
We might be, oh, there we go.
I got it, we got it. Okay, feedback already incorporated in the plan. We've also received a number of comments regarding elements already incorporated into the plan that confirm they are valuable action items for the next 5 years. Accessible and equitable employment opportunities. I think we all strive for that. Accessible building design, including lower counters, accessible doors and ramps. We're trying our best. We've made great strides in doors and ramps, and hopefully we can, some people are complaining about the buttons are too far away, but we'll look at those. Accessible businesses, even though the town cannot mandate accessible features outside of the requirements of the building code and the AODA, the committee has identified an opportunity to work with the business community in an advocacy role to encourage more accessible or universal designs, features, as well as to communicate business responsibilities to comply with the AOD Act requirement by 2025. As you know, the Act actually started in 2005 and it came into effect of 2010. And so everybody had 15 years. But they changed a few of the things with the older buildings because they realized that they couldn't mandate a lot of the older buildings, and buildings built in the 1800 and 1850, like some of our buildings are difficult to change. Consideration of American Sign Language for staff and potential public programming opportunities. This is another thing we've taken, the committee's taken, and in fact, it's another item on the Accessibility Advisory Committee for the agenda this month. So we're looking at the sign language. So with all that, I want to thank you. Special thank you to all the organizations and members of the public and committee members and staff for providing their valuable input. I was just amazed at the number of people who came forward and the number of people who came forward and says you're doing a great job. So let's take it and thank those people also. And thank you for having me today.
And thank you, Ms. Adolph. And I will turn to the committee and ask if there are any comments or questions regarding this presentation. Committee? All right, and then the motion in front of us is moved by Councillor Berman and seconded by Mayor Saunderson, that the 2020 to 2025 strategic multi-year accessibility plan hereby be adopted. And I will call the question. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We move on to departmental updates and discussion, and I believe we have several, and we will begin with item 8.1, which is the service delivery review update, and I will hand it over to Acting CIO Skinner.
Thank you very much, Chair McLeod, and in recognition of the wonderful work being done in the Executive Director Culver's area, I'm going to immediately hand it over to him to update the committee. Thank you.
Excuse me, I was choking a second ago. Through you, Chair. The service delivery review. So an RFP was sent out, and it was based on the idea that we're looking to improve the understanding of programs and services that are delivered by the town, and provide information that will allow the community, council, and staff to make informed strategic choices regarding those services. So the things that we'll be considering in this project will be things like information on the users who are benefiting from services, any opportunities we might be able to find to streamline services, indicating and identifying success and performance measures and how achievement can be done while increasing efficiency and effectiveness. We're looking at cost savings. We're looking at where the town can better identify or better focus, I should say, on core businesses. Vision of where the physical locations for the services should be and what's offering through there now and what should be available online. We're looking at possible opportunities to leverage or collaborate with other municipalities, or where other studies might be warranted. And we're looking for prioritized recommendations. So effectively, the SDR will assist the town in exploring how municipal services will be delivered sustainably over the long term, and also take a comprehensive look at why and what the town does, and if it can be done more effectively or efficiently. This is being funded by a provincial grant of over $180,000. So this is actually allowing us to do what had been discussed with council being done over a longer period of time. You'll recall the deep dive process of last year. This will mean that nobody else has to go through what I went through in delivering that deep dive. But you'll also recall too that it took quite a while for us to assemble that deep dive. When you're in the process of delivering services, it's very hard sometimes to analyze services. And so this gives us that opportunity. And so we're very grateful for the grant. The RFP has closed now. The bids have been evaluated, and Deloitte Consulting is the successful proponent to implement the review. We were looking forward to a first meeting with them, and that'll help us to determine a timeline. There's a few pieces here. COVID has put a delay on this project, and the province has already stretched the end date once. We're going to, after we have a conversation with Deloitte, we may be back with the province to ask about extending the deadline again for completion. Ideally, we'd be looking at an early next year completion. But after we have all those conversations, we'll have a much better sense of the total time frame. And that's the update.
Thank you very much. And CEO Skinner.
Thank you. I just wanted to, thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to add that I think this is another piece of getting our house in order, and one of the primary functions, in my opinion, that council has is to manage these services to the public, because that's really what we're doing with the tax funding that is collected on behalf of residents and property owners here. And so the work that Dean's doing with Ingrid Masiak and the others, Deloitte, now that they've been named as a successful proponent, I think is really moving toward helping council members to understand how many users there are for the different services that are offered, you know, how much of our tax funding goes toward each. And it's never perfect. Like, we'll never get it down to the dollar, whether that dollar was, you know, keeping the door open for the library or for the people who were going through that entrance space to go upstairs to go to planning or something like that. But I think we'll give you a lot more information to make educated decisions for our community moving forward. And I'm really pleased with the $180,000 from the province for this work. Thank you.
Members of the committee, have you any questions for either Dean or Sonia? Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to either Dean or Sonia. One of the points you raised, Dean, was the performance metrics and looking at the efficiencies of our services as we provide them to our end users and who they might be. And so benchmarking and setting up those performance metrics is a key to this process, I would think. And we were just involved in the UN Habitat Conference when we were talking about establishing benchmarks and performance metrics for municipalities generally. And while these are internal, I'm wondering if there's a way that we can link these to our external or some sort of external benchmarking to kind of give us an idea of and not only how our services are being delivered internally, but what the efficiencies are, and in terms of our role as a municipality and being sustainable moving forward. I don't know if it's possible to connect the two, but it seems to me that we're kind of looking at a mirror image of the same coin about the metrics and performance indicators, one internally and one more externally in terms of our role as a municipality in the lives of our residents. And I'm wondering if there's a way to link the two.
Executive Director Culver?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I thank you, Chair. That I think it's a question we need to ask the consultant, and we need to get some advice on how relevant that'll be. And I'm not trying to avoid it. I'm just sort of it's a very difficult. We run into this often when we talk about sort of municipal measures, the I can't remember what they are, when you're comparing communities, you're comparing processes, because oftentimes we're faced with an apples and oranges comparator at the base, which means that everything beyond that is difficult to compare. I would defer to a consultant who has a lot of expertise in this area, and potentially there is a method or a modality for doing that. I just don't know exactly what that is at this time. Definitely, I think based on your question, we'll ask the question.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Does that assist? Anything else?
Nope, that's it for me. Thank you.
And the other members of the committee have questions for either of these? Okay, and neither have I. So we will move on to item 8.2, the budget software, and Treasurer Leonard.
Through you, Madam Chair, since this will be Mr. Switzer's first budget, I'm going to turn that question and update over to him.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you, Treasurer Leonard, and thank you, Chair McLeod. As the committee is aware, the town had issued an RFP for budget software, and we've completed an open market RFP process for the budgeting software solution. And the successful proposal was Questica. We're currently finalizing the contract agreement with Questica, and subsequent to that, implementation will begin at a date to be determined. Given the time frame, the tight time frame for the 2021 budget, as well as a 13-week implementation timeline for the Questica budget solution, we've decided that Questica will not be utilized for the 2021 budget preparation. We plan on beginning, the implementation at a date that allows for us to dedicate sufficient resources to the implementation to ensure we implement it properly. And then we plan on utilizing the software in 2021 for budget to actual comparison, as well as the 2022 budget preparation. And that's the update for the budget software. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Switzer. Can I say both? Are they both treasurer at the same time? Any questions from this committee for the treasurers? I actually have one, and Mr. Spitzer, I wonder whether when we say it's going to take an implementation, and that once it's implemented for 2021, we're going to have a better look at budget versus actual. Can you sort of explain to me why that is an important thing? I think I understand why, but I think that it's something that not all of us really grasp deep in our soul.
Well, I think what I'm speaking to is more easier access to budget to actual comparisons for staff and council. I don't want to speak before having completed the implementation and working with the implementation team on the exact functionality and the features that will provide. But as part of the proposal that we received, there was and the demo that we saw, there were some very interesting features that allowed for very detailed explanations on variances and allowing more efficient communication of those variances by the individuals and the managers and department heads who are responsible for those budget lines.
So we would be able to know sooner rather than later when there's been something go on that we might need to be apprised of, is what I'm asking, really. Once this is in place. Sorry.
I can't, because we'll be comparing budget to actual. The answer to your question really relates to on how quickly we can get updated figures into our GL that then will communicate with this budget software. So that's more related to how efficiently we are recording invoices, and I think that's a separate conversation to be had that isn't necessarily related directly to the budget software.
Got it. CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Chair McLeod. And in response to your question as well, in talking with the two treasurers, one of the things that I think the software will help us with is not only looking at what's already been spent, but looking at how department heads see the year shaping up to the end of year. So, billings that are, may not have come in yet, but they know or will be late or will be early, or there will be unexpected costs and potholes or whatever the thing is. We'll be able to harvest more of the intellect and knowledge within the corporation, not only on the financial side, but I hope in the leadership of the departments and their relationship back to finances reports. Thank you.
Thank you. That does answer my question. Thank you. There being no other questions from the committee, we'll move on to item 8.3, which is Fire Chief Parr. And I will let him float your boat. That was for the mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's a couple pictures that could go along with this, or I did supply them. First of all, I don't know if more excited, proud, or I'm not sure what I how to describe it. That we received the boat last week from our builder in Parry Sound. I was fortunate enough to be the first one to step on it and also drive it, so that was a pleasure for myself, bringing back memories when I was on the trucks and doing stuff like this in my past life. The guys, the staff are just super excited about it. The design of it, how we've got it so far. The process we're in right now is just getting it decaled, lettered to meet industry standards with registration on it, and then proceeding with training of staff. It's a whole new boat for us compared to what we shared with Parks, Rec, and Culture. So it's going to take a little time, but still, if we need it, we can put it into service. And the advantage to this boat to the other, we have actually a built-in fire pump came with this boat. So it's pretty exciting, and it's just fabulous how it handles in the big water and also in around the shallows in the marina. The other thing I'd like to say is also still can't believe a resident stood up and donated money for this. So it was pretty good that happened. So if any questions on the boat, I have one other little tiny update also. So,
members of the committee, have you questions for Fire Chief Parr regarding the boat? Vice Chair Comey.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Through you to the chief. Well, obviously, congratulations. That's really exciting. And then I think you mentioned before in an email that it has a certain rescue capabilities for paddlers as well to bring, recreational boats on if needed. Is that correct?
Through you, your chair, that's correct, Councillor. The front nose, it's called a bullnose design, where the front nose drops and it goes level with the water. So it's available to pull vessels, small vessels, people, and other devices onto the boat easy for rescue purposes. So
that's great news. That's really wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, this is a Stanley boat, and just as a point of interest, Mr. Stanley's daughter has represented Canada many times at the Outrigger Canoe Championships, and I think is a world gold medalist. So if she ever needed rescuing, I'm sure this boat would be up to it. But it's very exciting to have this boat, and thank you very much to the private donor that helped to make this happen.
And I have a question now that we've exhausted the questions from the committee. Is there going to be a name for this vessel?
We have not discussed that yet. That could be something we could do, maybe a little competition or something within town. That would be, you must have a name you want.
No. I highly recommend against a competition. I think that the British Navy can speak to that. because of their Bodie McBoat face that they, so I would recommend against that. Perhaps.
Okay.
I was just curious to know when you said you were going to be putting decals and stuff on it, whether it was the, the HMCS Collingwood or something.
No, through you, Chair, not at this time. It just will, we're just, Marine One is the official designation of the boat, and then that's what we will be dispatched with by Barrie Fire, so.
Super, thank you. And you have another update that you want to provide with us with.
Yeah, just in 2019 budget, we were approved for a new fire truck. Excited to say that the cab's been manufactured with no delay through COVID and arrived in New Brunswick, where the manufacturer that does the rest of the work will be working on it, and looks like a January delivery. So everything's on par for that. Pardon my pun. So it's actually, well, it seems like tonight everybody else got a little in, so that was my first. It's another exciting piece of apparatus that will lead us to the future in the fire service in Collingwood. So.
Thank you so much, Chief Barr. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 8.4, which is Acting Director Milanovic regarding Fisher Field and the project that has been underway these many months.
Good evening, Madam Chair. This is going to be probably the shortest update possible. The tender package for the said washroom at Fisher Field and change rooms has been scaled down from the original version. Or the original concept. The tender was posted today on Bedingo, and the scaled down version includes 4 gender neutral washrooms, 2 team change rooms, and 1 designated referee change room. And it should close in about 30 days.
Thank you. Any questions from any members of the committee for Acting Director Milanovic? Vice Chair Comey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to Director Longovich and Executive Director Culver. Congratulations. That was a long time coming. You got lots of feedback from our community. And while it was certainly unfortunate that the ultimate plan didn't receive the funding necessary, I'm certain our community is going to be absolutely delighted by the outcome. So congratulations to all parties involved in getting this package out. It's really, really going to be a good news story for the community as a whole. With over 1,000 registered players and 30 years in Collingwood of our local soccer club, and many tournaments that bring literally thousands of families into the community, it will be much celebrated. So thank you again.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you very much, Acting Director Milanovic. And then that moves us on to item number 9 on our agenda, which is public delegations. And that is an opportunity for anyone who feels the need to address this committee with a time limit of about 5 minutes each. And have we anybody, Clerk Almus, I turn to you, anyone who is interested in speaking to us? I'm trying to stall while they get their hand up. Is an old radio trick.
Certainly. So the attendees have been on through the meeting, so they know the process, and no one has requested to speak.
And that brings us to item number 10, which is other business. Have we any other business, members of the committee? Now. And item 11, adjournment. And on my motion summary, I have moved by Councillor Comey that the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee be hereby adjourned. And may I have a vote on that question, please? All in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Chair.